أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Peace and blessings be upon you all dear viewers from all around the world wherever you may be watching. This is Ahlulbayt TV, the only channel broadcasting the pristine teachings of the Ahlulbayt alayhim as-salam, exclusively in the language of English. I'm your presenter for this evening, Abdurrahman Shukoya, and this is Reborn, the show that dedicates its time to hearing and airing the stories, the extraordinary stories of brothers and sisters who have made the step, the enormous step to Islam and of course to the madhab of Ahlulbayt, peace and blessings be upon them all. And today we're very lucky to have with us Sister Latifa Shalabi, who will share her story about how she came to the madhab of Ahlulbayt, peace and blessings be upon them all. So make sure you stay tuned because it's very fascinating, as always, of course. First of all, Sister, thank you very much. And I know you've had a bit of an arduous journey coming to the studio, but on behalf of all of our viewers, welcome. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum assalam. Thank you for having me.
Thank you. Okay, so Sister Latifa, can you give us a bit of a background in terms of your ethnic origins and so on and so forth?
I'm originally Palestinian, and I'm sure most of your viewers understand the conflict that went on in Palestine and had led many original citizens to escape and try and seek refuge in other countries. My family had taken refuge in Lebanon, and from there my father, who was a doctor, had married and went to Libya, to where I was born. From there I had spent 5 years of my life in the hot country among all the wildlife. Not really, I don't remember much except some goats and some trees. Other than that, I do remember the years after, which we had moved to Lebanon for 2 years, in which there is a strict Arabic/Islamic course taught to the children. So my education was quite heavily dealing with Arabic and Islamic studies. Okay. So Quran, I remember reading Quran, I remember reciting it, I remember the Islamic dress code, I remember the adhan being played 5 times a day, or recited rather, 5 times a day. So there is a bit of Islamic culture that sure. I remember as a child. As a child, okay. So these memories are still there. What was obviously you said you're very young, so it's understandable you couldn't really remember much about Libya. What about Lebanon? I mean, how long were you there for? I lived there for 2 years with my family. So from the age of 5 to 7? Yes, from the age of 5 to 7. Do you remember much about the life in Libya? In Lebanon? I do remember a lot about that life. It was very community-based, which is really nice in comparison to, sometimes you compare it to the West. It was very community-based. There was a lot of freedom for children. Again, in comparison to the West, there sure. isn't. So, kids would be running around in the street, having a lot of fun, playing around, being mischievous, but at the same time, having parents be 100% secure and comfortable with the fact that their children are safe. There's no one out there to hurt them. What else I remember my mother and, like cooking, and my father going out to work and coming home, traditional family setup. I remember my grandparents, and I do remember the conditions actually of living in a refugee camp in Lebanon. Quite harsh, very, very primitive in comparison to here. The roads and the hygiene, the insects and the infestations that you get there. Plus certain people lived in such poverty that would make you cry. A family of 4 would be living in literally 2 rooms, mixed, male and female, and that's not right. Sure. So including a bathroom and a kitchen in those 2 rooms, there's really no place to do anything and live comfortably. I do remember it. And presumably this was because they were Palestinians living in Lebanon. Yes, Palestinians in Lebanon unfortunately have a very, very grave fate of being second-class citizens. individuals who are Palestinians are not granted the rights of work. You're not allowed to work as a lawyer or as a banker or as a doctor. You're not allowed a place in government. You simply either have to work, as people say here, like on the black market, working without being legally registered, or you have to create businesses within the refugee camps and expand that way. I know cousins of mine still back home who have dentistry dentistry practices, as well as grocery stores and things like that opened up within the camps, which they are prospering, but at the same time you think that's very horrible for something that you can't control. To be a Palestinian, it's not in your hands. God has given you that identity for you to be prosecuted for something that you have no control over.
Sure. So, I mean, how did it work for your dad? Because I think you said he was a doctor.
He was a doctor. My father, he had been educated abroad, so there were certain provisions. I think the United Nations at the time were pretty active in that aspect, and they had provided a lot of opportunities for Palestinians who could study abroad. So my father went to study in Russia, and he opened up a practice inside the refugee camp.
Okay.
But that wasn't very fruitful, which is why he left for Libya. He left for Libya and worked there, and when he returned, he returned with the intention of moving to Europe.
Okay, and hence the reason why you spent the best part of your years in the UK.
Yes.
You came to the UK at the age of?
7.
Okay. I'm curious to know you mentioned how it was for you in terms of going to Arabic school and reciting and learning the Quran. What was religion like for you at home?
Religion didn't have much of a part in my life at home, because I think, unfortunately, as women, especially in the East, you have such burdens put on your shoulders. As you're supposed to be the perfect housewife. You're supposed to make sure your kids are clean, smelling nice all the time. That your house is supposed to be completely spotless, and at the same time you have to maintain yourself. You have to keep yourself presentable, slim, and finding time to watch TV or entertain yourself as an individual. I think that was a lot of pressure on any mother or any woman. In coming from that kind of background, or having that culture placed upon you. So from my mother's side, I don't really blame her. But and my father, obviously coming from a traditional family situation, my father was out at work all day. He'd come home late, and us kids were kind of left to our own devices. We'd either play if we want to, we'd go to our neighbour's house if we wanted to. So in the home, I wouldn't say there was much religion. I understood that there is a God. I understood what Allah meant. I understood that there is a prophet called Muhammad, and I understood that when someone prays, they wear certain garments, they do certain actions. But I didn't understand the spiritual aspect of things.
Sure. What about in the UK? I mean, was there any sort of Islamic influence? I mean, were you sent to Islamic school, Saturday school, like in a religious Saturday school, anything like this?
Yeah, when I did come to the UK, alhamdulillah, my mum did want us to be educated and make sure that we didn't lose the language. It's so important, learning the Quran, and also the fact that it's part of my heritage, which I'm sure she didn't want me to lose either. So she did make sure that we were part of a school and that we would go there every Saturday. But again, it wasn't, for me personally, it wasn't much of an Islamic influence. It was just another place to socialize with children, and try to read a few sentences in Arabic and not look like a fool in front of the other kids for not learning it the week before. So although the intentions that my mother had were great, I don't think that it had much of an impact for me Islamically.
Right, okay. I'm just curious as to how it would be for somebody. I mean, maybe you weren't necessarily thinking that much about religion then, but coming to the UK at the age of 7, into, round about from 7 to your teens, I mean, was there a marked shift in your kind of outlook, your religious outlook, coming from the East, from a, as you said, traditional Islamic background, to the West, which is predominantly secular?
I think as a child, when I was 7, I don't remember much variation in religion. You know, I didn't notice that, okay, this country has a mosque and this country doesn't. I remember as a child going into school that it was very different for me because I didn't speak the language. Also because I was a different colour to the other kids. I remember that being a difference. Also, you know, the way my parents would dress me was different to the way that other parents dressed their kids at the school that we went to. So outwardly there was a great difference that I noticed between me and everybody else. But as a child, from 7 till about 10 years old, there wasn't a great distinction I could have made between Islam and East and West,
sure.
The Islamic and the non-Islamic.
Sure. When you say that your parents used to dress you differently, what exactly do you mean?
Well, I think coming from a different background, you'd wear like velvet trousers, and no other kids will wear velvet trousers. It's not it's nothing big. It's just different styles, different colours.
Yeah, I think I can relate to that because I spent some time back in my home country and came back to the UK where I was born and spent most of my life. And I remember being picked on at school because I actually looked different. The clothes that my parents would buy for me to go to school in made me stand out. I mean, was that the case for you?
Yes, definitely. The thing is, I wouldn't blame them though.
Of course.
It's not something that they understood. I'm sure that from what they saw, they'd wish they were able to dress the same when they were younger. So they had brought the best for me, but unfortunately, it resulted in a divide between me and the children at school at that time. Obviously, as you grow up, you learn, even if you're wearing different clothes, you learn to kind of blend in with the other children. So yeah, throughout my secondary school years, although I was still more or less an outcast for other reasons, to some extent, I could still pass through the corridor without being picked on for the way I dress or the way I looked.
Why were you an outcast, if you don't mind me asking?
No, not at all. At secondary school, for reasons that I still don't understand fully, I was picked on by the popular kids, the English kids, who I think who just who didn't think deep into certain things, who didn't take their life seriously, who didn't take their education seriously. So coming from a background where my father was a doctor and my mother was a trained nurse and interpreter and assistant school teacher, coming from such a deep educational background, I was very motivated in my education. And I think that in comparison to the English residents here, or their children, rather, who I was mixing with at school, maybe that was what caused them. I'm guessing also I think one of 3 Asian kids in my year, so that could have been a reason. But I don't understand it till now.
So, are you trying to say that you were very intelligent and took your studies seriously? I mean, were you? I don't mean this to be disrespectful, but when we were in school, we used to pick out students in the class, and we would label them the teacher's pet.
That's not disrespectful at all. I think I was definitely a teacher's pet. I was very excited about learning new things because I just was. I didn't understand the benefit of that thirst for knowledge then, but alhamdulillah, I'm very grateful for it. It was something that it was very visible. I remember even a teacher, God forgive him, in a drama class had actually said that, as part of drama they would, try to give examples. They say, okay, so now imagine yourself as an animal, what would an animal be? Latifa obviously she's always happy and she likes to please others, so she would be a dog. And so from a young age, people could notice that enthusiasm in me. And it was something that I think other kids didn't like very much.
Sure. What was it like in terms of the kind of ethos of the children that went to the school? I mean, were they well behaved? I mean, was there a drug problem? Was this kind of the practice of boyfriend, girlfriends quite rife in the school?
The school that I went to was actually recently been attempted to shut down. As in, so you can imagine the behaviour that goes on, the low levels of achievement that go on. So I think it would be fair to say that the school that I was in and the people that I was interacting with were of a very, very low humane nature. Definitely girlfriend, boyfriend practices, all that was happening from a very young age. And the same can be said for drugs. They were entered into schools, children were smoking quite casually. There was a lot of violence, I remember, a lot of violence. Fights would happen every other day. We'd hear about girls and boys getting in trouble with drug dealers outside of the school premises. Gang on gang, school on school type of violence. It was very negative to think back on it. Alhamdulillah, I didn't feel that at the time. I was very unaware of. It felt like a distant world to me. I don't associate that to Islam. It was just because I was not with the crowd. I was completely outside of their inner circle. So it was a very distant lifestyle.
For you, okay, alhamdulillah. So at least that made life, I guess, a lot easier for you. With the benefit of hindsight, alhamdulillah. Were there other Muslims in the school?
There was, but I think there was no one that, I think because of the way I was, which wasn't a practicing Muslim, I hardly knew anything about my own religion. So in comparison to them who probably existed, we had nothing in common for us to identify each other as Muslims and coming together and learning from each other and benefiting from each other's friendship. It was, so I wouldn't have known.
Sure. So I guess you hung around with those who were kind of like-minded in terms of their studies?
Yes and no. I think through my years of secondary school, I mixed around with a lot of different people. Alhamdulillah, I had my white nerdy friends. I had the black thuggish type girls who would try and blackmail even me into doing certain things. And at the same time, I had my Muslim girls who take off their hijab for PE type people. So I had a very mixed variety of friends and a very mixed variety of influences. Sure.
And back at home during these years in your teens, was the situation still the same in terms of, so you wasn't really that influenced by religion at school or amongst your peers, and at home was it the same? Because I know you have quite a few brothers and a sister as well. Were any of them religious?
No, unfortunately the background that I come from, and heavily dictated by my father, is very culturally based. It's very, very shallow and has nothing really to do with religion. The only time I think religion comes into it is during Ramadan, during times of crisis, during births or during deaths. Every Marriages, I wouldn't say so.
Okay.
Because of the types of weddings that would happen,
sure.
And also, surprisingly, I've only learnt this recently, but the certain laws that we have in Shia Islam about mahar and the women choosing themselves or having access to the contract of marriage, stipulating their own conditions that my aunties and my mother were not privileged to. So even within the marriage contract, there's I don't see any real Islam in it.
Yeah, that's quite an interesting point you've touched on there, because how was it in terms of were you able to decipher the difference between religion and culture, or did you assume it all to be culture, all to be religion, or just both?
I think up to secondary school, sixth form, so about 16, 17 years old, I had assumed that religion and culture were one, and especially because we are Arabs. Unfortunately, I thought that that was the way it was, because the Quran came down in Arabic and the Prophet was an Arab, and therefore our culture was our religion, and that we were smart enough to use our religion and derive from it the good things and shape our culture around that. So that's what I had assumed.
And had you assumed that based, was this an assumption that you came to on your own, or do you think that's what everybody around you believed?
Definitely what everybody around me believed, and obviously because I think unfortunately families don't really pay much attention to the spiritual development of an individual, especially when they're in school and they're getting report cards every other month, that they would push you more into the education side of things. So I didn't really pay attention to that, and I had assumed I think it was an assumption of mine, but based on the actions of my family and based on what they would say, what they would do, how they would act.
Okay, interesting. Okay, so secondary school, alhamdulillah, as you said, you were able to keep out of the goings on that was happening around you. So what happened after secondary school?
After secondary school, there was a great shift in my life. I had moved from my mum's house and moved to live with my father, who was very strict and very culturally based. There was hardly any religion in his actions or his treatment towards, I think, anyone in the family and outside. And so to some extent there was an implementation of modesty. So I couldn't wear short sleeves anymore. I had to cover up to my elbows.
Up to your elbows?
Yes, up to my elbows. And in some parts of the world, hijab is actually considered up to your elbows and up to your knees. And this is unfortunately an Islamic thing. So yes, up to my elbows. Also, clothing had to be up to a certain level. It had to extend and cover, the legs and so whatnot. So I did feel a tighter implementation of what I thought was Islam on my life at that time.
What you thought was Islam?
Yeah.
Now, so you'd left the school that you were at previously,
yes,
where all of these goings on were taking place, and again, there were some Muslims, but you just kind of were friends with them, and then you moved to this new area, which was Tooting, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, Tooting.
Now, what I know of Tooting is that it has a lot of Muslims living in that vicinity, in that particular area, and even further afield. So did this have any impact on your religion?
Oh, alhamdulillah, it did. Slow at first, but it speeded along later on. When I had enrolled in a sixth form, next stage of education, so I interacted with a lot of people who were, the same age as me, same colour as me, and the same religion as me. And at first it was very basic, broad Islam, which I needed to learn because I had not known it before. But then it got deeper. People were discussing things like shirk and bid'ah, and that's where Shiism comes in, I guess.
Of course. But just out of curiosity, before we go for the break, because we're due for a break now, what sparked the interest at that particular juncture? Was it just simply because you were around Muslims and you just wanted to find out more about the religion, or what?
No, it was, subhanAllah, looking back on it, you think the way God makes plans for us, you could never program it yourself. The way it happened was just a random friend had asked me, what do you think of the Shia? And talking out of ignorance and coming from a very cultured background, the first thing that came out of my mouth was, they are kafir, they beat themselves up, it's haram, it's un-Islamic, they're not Muslims, and that's the end of that. And my friend who was Shia, a very close friend of mine, alhamdulillah, till this day, was listening to this, and she was very, very shocked by what I had said and very upset, understandably. It's only when I realised what I had said and who I had said it to that we had a conversation, and she just told me that, look, you don't even know what you're saying. If her reaction just woke me up, and I had thought, if this is a close friend of mine, I know her character, she's a good person. a good person cannot follow something so wrong as to be called a mushrik or a kafir. So because of my friend and what she had believed in, and the way that I felt I had hurt her, and my own ignorance, I felt that it was wajib on me to learn more about her situation and her religion.
Okay, brilliant. Thank you very much. Sister Latifa, we're due for a break now, as I said. Inshallah, when we come back, you can let us know how your quest for knowledge about the madhab of Ahlulbayt progressed, inshallah. Join us after this short break. See you soon. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome back to Reborn on Ahlulbayt TV with our guest today, Sister Latifa Shalabi, who has been so far telling us about her quest for knowledge about Islam, particularly Shia Islam. Before we go into what you did next in terms of trying to find out more about the madhab of Ahlulbayt, I'm curious as to what made you make those claims in the first place, i.e. the Shia kafir, they worship stones or whatever it was that you were thinking at the time. Where do you think because you mentioned how you weren't really that religious prior to this anyway, so where do you think these misconceptions came from?
To be truly honest, I think it came from my family, unfortunately. Coming from certain strict Sunni backgrounds, I think this happens a lot with those kind of individuals, where once in a while they like to have a good Shia bashing. They would sit down, the topic would come up from some end. Usually it's around Ramadan, where we fast differently to the Sunni brothers and sisters. So they'd say, they'd literally start up from there. These people are always on the wrong path. They would always try and do this, and then they would bring up the issue of shirk, the issue of bid'ah, the issue of our madhab have been started from Jews, talking, all the misconceptions.
Obviously you're talking about the madhab.
Our madhab of Ahlulbayt. They would bring such ridiculous stories, Allahu A'lam where they come from. But as a child growing up in that kind of environment, even if you're not if you're not sitting with the adults and you're listening to them, just hearing it once in a while, you do pick up on it.
Sure.
And I remember once asking my father directly, what's a Shia? And he would tell me that, it's someone who prays on stones, they worship the stones. They pray like us, but they pray on stones.
And of course your father is educated.
What?
I said, of course your father is educated.
Yeah, my father is educated in the sciences, but unfortunately not in other aspects at the time. And so as a child, you ask that, and because it's so different from what I was used to, what? Pray on stones? You pray on a mat. What have stones got to do with it? It's such an unnatural place for a stone to be under your forehead whilst you're praying. So it was a very big. I remember that very, very clearly, and I think that among other things shaped my view of the Shia at the time to be negative.
Sure. So this friend of yours was upset. And as you said, this spurred you on to find out a bit more. I mean, what exactly did this friend of yours say when you told her all of this? She just said basically, you don't know me to be able to judge me.
She said something of that nature, but it was mainly, look, you're talking out of ignorance. It's not about her as an individual. I knew her as a friend, but she just said, you don't know my religion, you don't know what I believe in, so why are you saying what you're saying? You ask me, I'll ask me questions, I can reply back to you. But when you make statements, what room is there for discussion when you've already decided? And at that stage, it was a very big thing for me to hear, because I have living in a very traditional background and growing up in the West, women are supposed to be in the kitchen, yet I felt empowered as a woman in the West, and I didn't want to be in the kitchen. I wanted to be out where my brothers were. I wanted to be on bikes, I wanted to go to the parks, I wanted to go to my friend's house. And you would hear things like, no, it's not in our culture, this is wrong, it's not in our religion. And I knew what it felt like to some extent be oppressed by who you were. So when I had felt that I had oppressed another individual, or had judged another individual based on something that I have no knowledge of,
sure.
it was a very deep emotion, and I think that's what sparked my journey.
Sure. So then, how did you go about finding out more about Islam, about Shia Islam?
Well, I had been reading, books, but there's only, I think, so much that you can get from books, especially as a Sunni individual. You'd kind of go on the website, and then you'd find 101 websites about why Shias are wrong, and why, and it's always from one-sided, and I did understand that. I did understand that there was always a bias. So I think, I don't know what I was waiting for, but I knew that I couldn't progress with the knowledge that I wanted to learn from these sources. Alhamdulillah, later on that year, I was introduced to a brother at my school who was Shia, and very open about it, very comfortable with it. And someone who's very active vocally, who, mashallah, wrote poetry. He was a great debater, very active in his studies as well. He left nothing unturned, or every aspect of his life. You could tell that this individual placed a lot of emphasis and a lot of concentration and focus into. So, alhamdulillah, he had the time to answer my questions. He had the time to direct me to exactly what kind of books I should be reading, rather than picking up any women in Islam type books. I should be learning about the Ahlulbayt. I asked him a lot of questions. Why do you focus on other people? Why can't you just talk about the Prophet? The Prophet is where it all came from. And he's like, well, of course we do talk about the Prophet. It's just that with the Ayyimah, he explained to me their infallibility. And he explained to me the fact that everything that has been said by the Ayyimah has originally come from the Prophet. If we have no sources from it being directly from the Prophet, then the Ayyimah are the best source other than him.
Sure.
He showed me from the own Sunni books, Hadith books, Muslim, Bukhari, all these other books, that the importance of Ahlulbayt, that normal Sunni Muslims, brothers and sisters, don't place on them, and that the place of the companions which they have is the place of our Ahlulbayt, and even higher.
Sure.
So from him I gained a completely different insight into Islam. Before, even when I was trying to learn about Islam, and I got involved with the Sunni brothers and sisters in the school, I still felt there was some sort of distance from life and religion. They all seemed to have their own places. They were distant in some way. But when I started learning about Shia Islam, they just became unified so beautifully. Everything had a reason. Women weren't oppressed anymore. Surprisingly, even in Sunni books, women shouldn't speak. There should be a veil. Not just a scarf on her head. No, there should be a physical parting between a teacher and his students, or things like that. That there was no reason for. Shia Islam, I saw, had such a practical, just made life so easy, and made life to be lived the way it should be. So thanks to the brother, alhamdulillah, I came to the school of Ahlulbayt.
Alhamdulillah. Did you ever have conversations with your Sunni counterparts about the thought processes that you so eloquently just explained to us now? Was this something you shared with them, and if so, what was the response?
I I didn't share them openly, as in people understood that I, Sunni, was hanging around a Shia person, and that he was rubbing off on me, because I think in my actions as well, I started to understand through the madhab of Ahlulbayt that you can't be a passive Muslim. That's not an acceptable thing for you to be. You have to be an active Muslim, and through that more questions started coming in my head. So when I started thinking like a Shia, so in front of Sunnis, they would say certain things that they no longer made sense to me. I would reply back to them, and I would challenge those views. So they did pick up on that change. I think they'd be stupid not to have picked up on it.
Sure.
But no, a couple of people asked me, "Oh, are you Shia? Are you Shia?" I would always deny that. Firstly, because of my family situation. Coming from very, very strict, unreligious, but leaning towards a Sunni Wahhabi type mentality, it was very dangerous for me to have publicly admitted it.
Really? Yeah. Okay, that's quite interesting. Your family's non-religious, but leaning towards a kind of Wahhabi type Islam.
Yes.
So this brother was instrumental in you seeing the truth for what it was, and understanding the school of Ahlulbayt a lot clearer. Was this all that you needed to do for you to become a Shia? Or, was it on the back of these conversations that you decided after some time that, yes, I'm going to become a Shia, or not? Did you have to do something else?
I knew the truth when I saw it. And even though I did not admit it to myself or other people, I knew internally that that's what I believed in. Whether I did not practice what I had known or what I knew to be true for quite a while. I don't know whether it was laziness or whether it was just the environment that I was in, family pressure, but it was, how can I put it? The family in general, I think it had a great impact on the way that I lived my life in that aspect, in that time, where I would be surrounded by them for a very long period of time, and where I was influenced on one side by my brother. I was influenced, as in my brother in Islam, the brother who had helped me.
Sure.
On the other side, I was influenced by my family, who, no matter, I think, what had happened, I had still felt some bond, some form of loyalty to them, although it seems ridiculous now, some form of loyalty, and just, I didn't want to do this to them. I knew what it meant.
So it would break their hearts? It
would break me as physically, but no, not just that. It was their reputation. My father has a reputation for being a doctor, and back home, and very revered, especially coming from poverty. For someone to have been a success and moved to Europe, if we had got back to home, also because we had a lot of friends who emigrated with us here, so family friends, and they were in the same school as me, their children, so it would be like a circle of reputation and fear of violence at home. Unfortunately, a lot of the culture in the East finds it okay for women to be beat. That's something that's completely normal. A man can hit his wife, a father can beat his daughter, to teach her a lesson. If she's out of line, then he somehow has the authority to do that. He can judge whether she's right or wrong, and he can train her through violence to change her ways. I think it was a fear of a lot of different aspects that didn't make me actually implement what I had been taught.
So you, intellectually, you believed,
yeah,
but in terms of practice, it wasn't something that you were able to do, because it sounds like what you're saying is you would have become the black sheep, if I can use that phrase, or a source of shame for your family because you become a follower of the Ahlul. Really, it's that serious?
It is that serious, and not just a form of shame. It's a lot deeper than that. My father, as the head of the household, takes his position very seriously, and it would have, he's kind of the elder of our entire family, and again he has a big reputation back home, and it would not have been a source of shame. It would, in his eyes, it would have been the source of his destruction, and he couldn't allow, he wouldn't have allowed that if he knew. Yes, so he had made several comments because you could, he found the books that I was reading, he saw the turba a couple of times, and although he questioned and I gave logical answers, there was still a bit of doubt in his head, and he made, some comments about, don't you dare, over my dead body, those type of comments that made me quite fearful of publicly announcing myself as a Shia to my family.
Sure. You have to forgive me, I'm a little bit confused. And I want to maybe talk a little bit, if you don't mind, about the violence in a minute, but you've got to this stage where you've accepted this path, but there's some real and present danger at home, yet you're sitting here on telly announcing to the world potentially that you're a Shia. I mean, so what broke the cycle?
Recently I have made a decision to live my life the way that I should. So I have been practicing taqiyya for such a long time now. Alhamdulillah, the opportunity presented itself where I have been able to move back to my mum's house and live with her. Alhamdulillah, she's from what I believe, and may Allah guide her father to be a good Muslim and someone who is on the middle path, not an extremist, and neither is she not practicing. I was able to comfortably tell her what I believed in and why I believed in it. Although there's not any true acceptance of that, it's still, I can live my life with her. We're still mother and daughter, and that's more or less why I've decided to take the step. There's no reason for me not to speak about my journey. There's no reason for me to hide any longer. I haven't spoken to my father about it yet, so he doesn't know from me. I'm sure he will do soon.
From you or
from anyone? Now, alhamdulillah, that shame that I thought I would bring to him no longer matters, because in one way or another, this could be a great khair for him. Him knowing that I am a Shia may somehow bring a series of events that will result in his guidance. But in any case, alhamdulillah, now I'm in a situation where I don't fear his violence, I don't fear his influence on my life anymore.
Just because you've moved away from...
I've moved away. There was an issue of disownment in there as well, which I think, alhamdulillah, is for my own benefit anyway.
Disownment?
Yes. So my father, for certain reasons, about marriage and whatnot, also because I had finally stood up and said to him, I no longer allow you to be violent with me. He refused that I now have authority over myself and authority over his actions towards me, and that he refused that, what do you call it? He just refused that front. He refused the fact that I was my own person, and that I was no longer a blind sheep following whatever he wanted, and he no longer wanted me in his household, which alhamdulillah is what I've been wanting for a very long time, just haven't been able to act on it myself. So again, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is the greatest of planners.
Alhamdulillah, you're alhamdulillah, very, very strong, no doubt, because of course, for sisters sometimes, and it's good that you've come on the show as well, because sometimes we don't appreciate what some sisters have to go through, and may Allah continue to reward you for everything that you have gone through it. When you were able to break away, if I can call it that, from your father's dominance over you, and moved back to your mother and felt comfortable speaking to her about the changes that you had made in your life and so on and so forth, how was it in terms of, apart apart from the internet, apart from this particular brother who was very influential in those initial stages, I mean, had you had an opportunity to speak to anybody or go to any lectures? Did you strike up relationships with other Shia Muslims that helped you progress further?
Yeah, that's a really good point. During those years where I was practicing in taqiyya, there was obviously little that I could do considering the constraints on my time and where I went and who I saw. So even if my friends came over to my house, my Shia friends, there was little that we could discuss. You know, we'd have to create secret words.
Was your dad actually listening, do you think?
Well, I don't think he was listening, but there was always a fear of someone being around. You know, that's the kind of environment that it was. The house was small, overcrowded, you know, because of all the brothers and sisters and guests at times. And so, you know, there was always a fear of someone listening in to something, even if they didn't want to. Sorry, what was the question?
So I was asking about how, I mean, who did you gain... Where did you gain further knowledge from?
From on that aspect, I think, alhamdulillah, technology has a great part to do with people learning. You know, whether it's religious or any other type of my main source of knowledge came from the internet and from lectures of various scholars and lecturers. You know, Sayyid Mudarrisi is a great lecturer. I had listened to Ammar Naqshbandi on several occasions. Lectures were also of benefit to me. You know, Hassan Rajab Ali is an amazing individual who I think he talks to the modern man of today. You know, the scientist as well as the so his lectures had a really big influence on me. Also watching things live, you know, watching live at Karbala, watching protests and just seeing how people have been suffering and in the cause of Islam. And when I say Islam, I mean Shia Islam. You know, just I think the internet had a big influence on me. Or influence on me gaining any type of resource for me to learn from. Also, I had, because of my situation, it's so sensitive, and you know, it has both religious and social implications that you don't usually get a mix of both. I had spoken to Sayyid Fadl Milani, who is a great resource to the UK. Who's very accessible, mashallah, you know, on telephone or in person, and has such great practical advice to give. There's also other scholars who are around who I had the benefit of speaking to, alhamdulillah, who Allah had put in my path, who I had spoken to, and also I had spoken to the representative of my marja in London. So again, great accessibility of all these scholars, and they had all advised me to gain independence from my household. So to, in effect, move out, leave, gain financial independence from my father and from my family, and either move back to my mum's house, move into with a friend, live alone, you know, get married, just gain independence in that aspect.
Sure. Alhamdulillah. How has there been much of a cultural shift? And of course, maybe that's not the right word to use. From Islam as you knew it then, let's call it, because it was a kind of secular Islam anyway. The Islam as you knew it then, at certain times of the year, to Shia Islam, are you now able to decipher, to distinguish between religion and culture? And also, I mean, no doubt there will be some differences between what you used to observe and practice prior to the shift to Shia Islam.
I definitely can see a great difference now between my old lifestyle and then comparing it to my family's practice of Islam and my own practice now. Great differences. I think the most would be now, as a result of everything that had happened before, I completely reject culture. It's not something that I like to implement. You know, if it has a religious backing to it, then, you know, ahlan wa sahlan, do it, repeat it. But anyone that turns around and says, oh, but you know, this is what is culturally accepted here, it's not something that enters my mind. culture now means very little because of how I've seen culture abused, unfortunately forced upon me, when it was something that I didn't want to accept anyway. So I think that's a natural reaction. I'm very defensive now when it comes to anything that does not have an Islamic background to it. But in many cases, as in when I'm interacting with my Pakistani friends or with my Arab Muslims, Sunni, Shia, there's not much of a difference between the way they practice their Islam and the way I practice my Islam. We all wear practically the same thing. We discuss more or less the same things, and we have very, very similar views on the non-controversial topics of Islam. So in day-to-day practical lifestyle, no, there hasn't been much of a change, because alhamdulillah, most of culture does derive from religion.
Sure. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for the time that you've shared with us and sharing your story with us as well. And just on a final note, any regrets?
I think my only regret was not being braver, with regards to my father's situation. I don't think I have truly believed in the great majesty of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and until quite recently, until I saw how things just magically slot into place. I regret not taking the step myself, rather than more or less having it forced upon me. I think I could have, if I had taken that choice myself, I felt that maybe there could have been a greater reward for me there. Also, a test of character. I would like to think of myself as being stronger than that. And following in Imam Hussein's steps, standing up against oppression. I think that's my biggest regret.
But alhamdulillah, you managed to do it, even if it wasn't as early as you would have liked to have done it. So alhamdulillah, may Allah of course reward you and continue to shower His blessings upon you, especially in this holy month. Thank you very much once again on behalf of all our viewers for coming in. I know it couldn't have been easy for you to come and share so much sensitive information with us, and we are truly appreciative of it. Sister Latifa Shalabi, Assalamu alaikum, thank you very much. You've been watching Reborn. Remember, if you know of anybody who would like to come on and share their story with us, kindly email us reborn@ahlulbayt.tv. See you again soon, inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.